Hello, beautiful beings. Welcome to Conscious Field, a heart-centered container where we'll be holding space for new paradigm conversations with the intention to awaken the collective and co-create the new earth. We'll be tuning into flourishing voices from conscious artists, healers, visionaries, teachers, and students as they share their unique insights on spirituality, holistic healing practices, and sustainable community projects. With feet grounded into the earth and self aligned with source in this playground we call life. My name is Heitor, I'm your host, and today our guest is Shani. He's a SOMA Breathwork facilitator and just had his first Breathwork and Icebath retreat just a few days before this recording. So join us as we explore the mystical nature of breath, how to use your breath to raise your vibration, how to live more by breathing less, and also as we glance over how ancient wisdom is permeating back into modern mainstream society. Enjoy the episode. First of all, hello, thank you so much for coming to the Conscious Field.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be a guest on one of your first podcasts.
Yeah, this is a very special episode because it is the first one we're recording, so you get to see the whole progress from start to finish as we get better and improve. So I wanted to talk to you because actually I just came from Shani's first retreat as well. It was a breathwork retreat. There was also Icebath, and it was such a beautiful experience, very transformative. And so I wanted to have you on the podcast, talk a little bit about what you do and about what are your views, your unique perspective on this field. So I guess we can start with a very simple question. I was going to ask you, what is breathwork? But let's start with something even more simple, which is, what is breathing?
Yes, I think that's like a fundamental question of life, isn't it? Because breath is life. And I recently read a book. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jay Shetty. He's like an author, influencer, and he went to study in India with the monks. And one of the things that he said is when he was watching the young monks train, they were 10-year-old monks, and they were training the 6 or 7-year-old monks. The first thing they were teaching them on the first day at school was how to breathe. Yeah. And they asked him isn't that the first thing you learned at school is how to breathe? And that's actually, we're never taught how to breathe throughout our life. Mm. But breath is what connects the unconscious to the conscious. Mm-hmm. It brings life to the body. Mm-hmm. It basically is prana, which is life force energy.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's amazing. It's the only thing we do since we wake up in this world, since we're born until we die. It's the only thing that's always there. And actually, this was something you said in the retreat, and it really touched me.
It is, and it's something that we're never taught how to properly breathe. We maybe hear certain things growing up, like breathing deeply is good, or breathing through your diaphragm or through your nose. You kind of pick these things up maybe from people, people may mention it over time, but there's never actually any sort of formal training of breathing. And yeah, I feel that's kind of what I want to shift in my mission here, is normalizing the understanding of breath and how fundamental it is to everything within your life. Anytime you feel an overload of stress or you feel happy emotions, it's always your breath that's changing. Mm. It's you feel excited, your breath changes. You feel depressed, your breath changes. And if you're able to regulate your breath, you can actually change your mood just from simple breathing patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally true. I mean, I read somewhere that if you're angry and if you start breathing deeply to your diaphragm, you can't be angry anymore. It's physically not possible to hold this emotion that is very high energy, and you need to be breathing fast and shallow. But if you just breathe a little bit deeper, you cannot hold this emotion. You actually transcend it. also in intimacy, in sex, it's quite the same thing. You start to breathe deeper and get much more attuned to the present moment. So I feel it's very interesting that it goes both ways, right? Because when you're doing a certain activity, your breath changes. But if you change your breath, you also put yourself in that mind space.
Yes, most definitely. It goes both ways in that way. And for all of us, like, we experience life through our breath. For the majority of people, it's kind of an unconscious pattern. As humans, we are the only creatures that have the ability to physically regulate breathing. Like, we can regulate how fast or slow we breathe, and we have the conscious awareness to do that. And it's pretty interesting if you look into the correlation between how long certain animals in the animal kingdom live and how often they breathe. There's actually like a direct correlation there. So like rats, for example, they breathe up to like 150 times a minute, and they only live up to 2 years. So they breathe very fast paced. Whereas there are like certain types of like whales that breathe up only for like 2 or 3 times per minute, and they live up to 100 years.
Wow. Yeah.
So if we have the conscious ability to like regulate our breath and breathe less and be more efficient with the oxygen, it can actually extend our life. It is almost like we have a limited amount of breaths in our life, and breathing fast as part of our unconscious pattern is kind of deteriorating people's health. So that's another thing that I wanted to raise awareness for. Is not just like the breath as like a tool for transformation, but it's also a tool to like really improve your life in any way.
Yeah, that's very significant, especially in today's society where we're always trying to get somewhere and we're always moving very fast. And so we're breathing fast and everything is faster and faster. Just sometimes taking those moments to breathe deeper.
Like for me, the reason that I held the space this weekend, the retreat, is to firstly allow people the opportunity to breathe in nature, because I feel like that's missing for a lot of people who live in the city. So giving them a space where they can connect with the earth, lie down and actually breathe. And I think during those 3 or 4 hours where you guys were consciously breathing, practicing breath work, there's quite a lot of processes within our body that I don't want to get too technical into the science behind it, but there's like a process within our body where like we have, as humans, we have a problem of like overly oxidizing our body. So a lack of carbon dioxide within our body is actually causing the energy to be trapped. So on the energetic field, a lot of people are trapped. They have trapped energy because of a lack of oxygen within the blood. And that's due to the carbon dioxide not traveling to the right place. So when we do practices like the breath hold, they allowed you to go deeper.
Yeah, it was very interesting how when you're breathing, it really changes, everything. Also, I wanted to ask you, is there any difference between breathing through the nose and through the mouth?
Well, in general, if you breathe from the mouth breathing, it's completely unfiltered. So all of the toxins within the air, you're absorbing that into your system. Whereas our nose has like a natural filter that filters out all of those harmful toxins. It's actually designed to breathe, our noses. So even if you feel like your nose is kind of blocked, being able to breathe from your nose, even if it's like 20% of its full potential, is way better than breathing from your mouth at 100%.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've seen some pictures of people that couldn't breathe from their noses and how that affects the way that their face is formed, the way that the skull develops. So children that were not able to breathe from the noses became with a much more like underdeveloped face and with like a chin tucked in and stuff like this. So it's very interesting how the way that the breath is flowing through your body also affects your physiology.
It impacts so much of our cells, our bodies, because each of our cells has the ability to breathe. within it. And if we're constantly absorbing air that's unfiltered, we're just taking in a lot of toxins that are not really required for the body. So if you look at that over time, that can cause like a huge impact on somebody's health.
Would you say that breathwork can be a way to also prevent illness? I'm thinking especially because through the mouth it's unfiltered air, but we are in the cities also breathing a lot of unfiltered air, a lot of air that's been polluted already. Can breathwork be a tool to also push out the toxins from our body and kind of filter the air that's coming in a more conscious way?
Yeah, that's interesting. In general, I'd maybe not, because quite a lot of breath work is also practiced through the mouth. Because if we are only performing the breathing exercise for like half an hour to an hour, and you want to have like the biggest impact of overloading oxygen within your body, you can take more air in from your mouth than you can from your nose. So for that reason, for example, a lot of Wim Hof breathing is all done through the mouth, and he popularized it. And the reason for that is because, you can do shorter breaths. Like, it doesn't have to be like a full hour, but in the half an hour, you can get double like the impact because of the amount of oxygen you take in, but you also take in the toxins as well. So, the one that I practice, SOMA, they mainly use nasal breathing for that reason, because what's more important than the volume of air is the rhythm. So breathing to a rhythm, there's actually like a famous saying, which is like an acronym of breathe. If I can remember it correctly now, let's see. It's BREATHE, which is breathe rhythmically and evenly and through the heart every day. So as a rule of thumb, every day you should breathe within a rhythm and through the heart each day. And that's what breathwork is, essentially.
That's beautiful. Is it something that you do consciously every day, or should you kind of strive for it to become something natural, just second nature?
I think to get to that point is quite difficult within the modern world for a lot of people because of the stresses of life. So going from like your work or being in the metro or being like out in public, sometimes you tend to breathe the same way as the collective. So the way when you enter a metro and you feel the energy is quite dense, even if you're like high breathing. It's happened to me where I've come from like events and I feel super energized and pumped, and then you enter into a space where everybody's at a lower vibration, and then you tend to fall into that vibration.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to remain apart from that and stay and keep your balance of breathing. So that's why having a daily practice is probably more effective.
Yeah, definitely. But you can also be the change, right? I mean, if you're breathing deeper and then you enter a metro, maybe people around you can also feel that there's some sort of different magnetic fields going on there. And I've had that experience too, where when I release some tension and I just whoosh and I let go, I can hear someone on the other side of the street sigh just a second later, like almost immediately. Almost as if there was a burden that's been dropped.
Yeah, that side's 100% true as well. But it's like energy is contagious. So whether that's lower vibration or higher vibration, and if people are receptive to the higher vibration, you can also raise people's consciousness just from your own presence and breathing. So yeah, that's incredible.
So I'm familiar that there are a lot of different breathing exercises, different types. I've heard of holotropic breathing, like there's more chill and more intense ways of breath work. This one you're doing is called SOMA. So can you talk a little bit about these different modalities of breath work?
Yes. So a lot of breathwork recently became popularized through Wim Hof. I'm sure most people are aware of him, the Iceman, but the root of breathwork comes from pranayama, which is like an ancient Indian text, and that studies the breathing patterns within animals, actually. So a lot of the type of breathings that we look into, like you mentioned, holotropic, there is box breathing that's kind of used for, like Navy SEALs use box breathing as a way of connecting and really staying in the zone. But SOMA is the company that I'm currently working with as becoming an instructor, and they mainly use rhythmic breathing as their base, so breathing to a rhythm. And yeah, it's an interesting story about SOMA. I'm not sure if have you heard of SOMA before, like not as the company, but the word SOMA in ancient text.
Yeah, I've heard it's about, it was used in ancient Greece.
Yes, that's right. So it's like, it used to be a psychedelic drink that was created. I'm not sure the exact ingredients. It may have had its roots in like sort of ayahuasca type DMT sort of drink. And this was a drink that was a lot of like the philosophers back in the ancient times would drink, and they would come out with huge revelations and epiphanies and awakenings. At a certain point though, this drink became the ingredients for it, that they started to like run out. So people started to panic and they're like, oh my God, the SOMA's going to run out. So that's when they started to look inwards and developed certain breathing patterns to release those DMT chemicals within our body. So to release the SOMA from within. And that's actually kind of the basis of the SOMA practice, is a way of releasing those bliss states from within. And yeah, that's actually, it was developed by a guy who's actually a pharmacist. He has like a master's degree in pharmacy, and he's also a DJ. So he connected the breathing patterns with the scientific background along with the music. And as I'm sure you experienced this weekend, the music is specifically designed with the breathing patterns in mind. So when we breathe to like a pattern of like in for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds, the beat matches it. But when we speed up and do like in for 2, out for 2, the beat speeds up. And when you have like that experience with the music, it allows your body to fall into its natural rhythm.
Yeah, one of the things that I felt during the breath work at the retreat was the music was guiding us. I felt that I like that from one side, but from the other side, I also would prefer that to be a more organic experience, not like a pre-recorded audio with a voice that's always repeating itself. At the same time, I can get how that can become like a trance experience of entering this trance. But yeah, it's very interesting. SOMA, as a company, I've seen it before. Some Instagram ads becoming very popular, and it's very interesting to see how this such an old and an ancient practice, which is breathwork, is coming into the mainstream. Like a few years ago, that was meditation with the whole mindfulness movement, and now breath is also finding its way in. And I find that that's very powerful, even if the kind of practices are not so traditional. It's still amazing that there's a space for that to sink in and to weave into the mainstream.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of all started with yoga. It started with yoga because yoga in itself is not like people in like tight clothes doing stretches. That's not what yoga is. But if you ask anybody what yoga is today, that's what they associate it with. But it became popularized through that kind of image. And if we look at the impact of that, it's like, okay, maybe it's not sticking to its roots of what it is at its core, but the message is there, and it's actually improving lives overall. And it's tapping people into a whole new way of thinking. So somebody who grew up like all the way in like Lithuania would never have looked into breathing practices of pranayama, but maybe they took a yoga class and got interested into it. So it's kind of like a gateway of opening you up to new consciousness. And yeah, I feel like if we are going to create a new earth with raising the consciousness, then tapping into the youth market or what people are into and finding a way to package what is amazing into the mainstream is the way to do it. And I feel like Wim Hof has done it incredibly well. Like with the ice baths and the breathing, he's made it into like a challenge, a fun activity, and people go into that. And that's actually how I discovered breathwork myself, was from watching Wim Hof and then going deeper into breathing. So yeah, I feel like that's where the world is headed towards. And if we are on this path of creating a new earth together,
that's beautiful.
This is appealing to the masses.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a very tricky balance, because from one way, it's kind of getting the foot in the door. And I think it's definitely improving lives and impacting lives positively much more than negatively. However, it's still locked into this system that's very capitalistic and very productivity based, you know, all about getting results instead of just feeling into the process. And I feel like it's a beautiful balance, and we're going there. We're going in the right direction, definitely. And you really put it in words beautifully. So other than breath work, you also did ice bath in these retreats. That was an amazing experience doing the ice bath. For those who haven't tried it yet, I definitely recommend it. It's a very intense experience, but also very transformative. And yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I've practiced like cold water therapy in the sense of cold showers for a couple of years. Living in Portugal helps actually, because it's warm here. So in the summertime, like you just would prefer a colder shower. But even during the winter times, I found myself like, yes, still having cold showers. I actually just had one.
Yeah, me too. It's amazing.
It's way more refreshing than a warm shower. I always felt way better after the shower, having a cold shower, than I do after having a warm shower. So I prefer that. And then as I became interested in Wim Hof and started to look more into like the ice therapy, cold baths, I discovered a place here where a guy hosted these sessions, and I went along to a few and really enjoyed it. And I would always go back. Even from the first moment I went in, it was never like a struggle. I felt like at peace there. I felt like the way I was able to enter into such a high stress environment and feel at peace is because I've trained my mind to act in that way throughout life. So when I got to that, it was just another case of being under pressure but calm. When you get in, there's like, I'm sure you experienced it this weekend, even before getting in, there's like 100 stories about why you shouldn't do it. And then as soon as you get in, your mind is like trying to convince you to jump out. But then once you push through that, you realize that actually, once your mind realizes that he's not going to get out, it changes the story to actually, this is comfortable. So it could have been comfortable from the start, but it's just your mind trying to go into survival mode and try to save you because it feels like you're under pressure. But what that experience shows you is actually you have control over your mind, not the other way around. That's the way it should be. But the cold bath really shows you like that separation between self and mind for me.
Yeah, and it's amazing how breath is also intertwined with this experience of cold exposure. As soon as you get into the cold, you have this, you know, like you want to breathe in just hyperventilate from this shock. But actually it's such an amazing experience when you're able to go through it, because I feel it's not battling the cold. It's much more about easing into it, relaxing within the cold, you know? And once you do that, from my experience as well, you get this amazing just release, just relief.
When we were about to go in, or you were about to go in, you were a little bit hesitating, but then at the end, there was you just complete release, and it looked like you were having the time of your life in there.
Yes. I mean, it was the last thing that I wanted to do that day. I was looking at other people going and I was like, oh God, when is my turn? I really don't want to do this. But as soon as I just made the decision, I'm like, all right, and taking my clothes off and jumped right in. I feel like generally in life, it's really helpful to just make a decision and do it. You can be like thinking a lot about it before, but the moment you're like, all right, I'm doing it, then your mind, like, it's worthless to try to fight, because the decision is made. You're going to do it. So the mind kind of goes like, all right, I give up.
Yes.
And so you have this open space. And as soon as I jumped in, it was easy. I mean, it didn't feel uncomfortable. I would say maybe a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm also used to taking cold showers daily, so it's not that hard. For me, it's just so liberating to be able to be in that space where the breath is taking me, and it really creates this kind of expansion within my body. I feel like every one of my cells is resonating at a higher frequency once in contact with the cold, because it just brings me right to the present moment.
Yes.
There's nothing else to think about, because your body and your mind are just focused on survival. Pure survival, but not in this kind of worried state, much more in this calm state of, okay, I'm here now. There's nothing else to think about. And that's really, really freeing.
Yeah, exactly. What we're doing during the ice baths is we're placing our body under like a positive stress response. So we're giving ourselves stress, but in a controlled and positive way. So it forces your body to create new dopamine, forces it to create new cells and even during like some of the breath holds that we did, I don't know if you experienced that. There were like some people experienced tingling sensations and almost shakes, because during the breath holds, you're actually forcing your body into creating and regenerating cells that are dying. And that's why I feel like, a lot of this is actually a practice to improve our quality of life, both mentally and physically. And that's what's really drawn me to breathwork recently, over the last couple of years, to really focus in on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. I would also like to know a little bit of your story with that. Where were you before, and what brought you to breathwork specifically? Because I think it's funny to mention this, that we've met for a long time actually, and more in self-development groups, circles. And it's very interesting to see your progression through that into the more spiritual side. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting to mention. We met quite some years ago while you was going through your growing up process, as we all are. And it's interesting to see your journey as well. I feel honored to have witnessed the growth and where you are currently and where you're heading towards. It's amazing. For me personally, we met through some self-development groups, and I was more focused on improving myself and kind of in a phase of, let's say, doing self-development as from a state of being, of trying to accomplish things in life, trying to improve and be better. And it took me until the whole lockdown, COVID happening. I don't know if I should say that, but the lockdown happening for the world to shut down and me to have to slow down and break out of my patterns to realize that I found it difficult to meditate and sit down for like even 5 to 10 minutes without like external stimulus. So I started to practice different types of guided meditations, and that's where I discovered the Wim Hof breathing method. But yeah, I think one thing that happened recently that was quite profound in my whole journey in this was being around my granddad for his last days. So I received a message like a few months ago that from my family saying that my granddad is close to the end and he's about to pass away. He's in the hospital. So he's in the UK. I had to travel from Portugal to the UK literally that night. No plans, just had to catch a flight that night. And yeah, like I was with my family. We ended up spending like a week with him in the hospital bed, and seeing him breathing on a machine, like being stuck on a machine, unable to even breathe by himself. Even like one breath of air was like a chore for him. Seeing that was like, it shook something within me where it's like, I didn't really appreciate my breath until that point. I wasn't really appreciating every single breath. And yeah, like it really changed the way I witnessed my own breathing, other people's as well. And also, I guess, accepting death as a part of life.
Yeah, that's very deep, very deep.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, also feeds into this idea of gratefulness, of realizing we're always trying to improve ourselves, get somewhere, but we rarely stop to notice how far we've come as well. Taking always that moment to be grateful just for the breath.
Yes.
Such a simple thing, but so powerful.
Yeah. I don't know if that's part of your practice as well, gratitude, but I've started to do that every day. I actually have it here, this little book where I write every day, like 3 things that I'm grateful of. And it's always a different 3 things. Starting off the day like that actually improves my whole energy that day, because I'm immediately brought to thinking of ways that I feel grateful in life. It completely changes my mindset.
Are there any practical tips that you want to give to our audience that they can implement in their life today, right now, to just improve their breath and their overall mood and state of being?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are quite a few things that you can do today. One of them is actually one of the things that we did at the start of our session. I think if you remember, we were supposed to do this a couple of times, but we did it at the start, which is measuring our breath hold time. It's something that, I can explain the reason for why it's important and then show you how to do it. But how long we're able to hold our breath is a direct correlation between how strong how good our health is, basically. If we're not able to withstand at least 20 to 30 seconds without taking a breath in, it means that we're constantly overloading our body with oxygen, and it's a clear sign that we are breathing too much. And as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, there are animals that in the animal kingdom who breathe less live longer, and the same applies to humans. If you breathe less, you live longer. So if you're not able to at least hold your breath for around 30 to 40 seconds at a minimum, then there's some problems. But the longer you're able to do this, the healthier you are. So before we start, take an inhalation and then exhale. And another inhalation. And then hold.
2 hours later.
And when you let go, you don't want to be at the point of like almost passing out. You don't want to push it too far. You just want to be sure that you can do at a minimum between 30 and 40 seconds. And this is something that you can practice on a daily basis just to tap into that state of breathlessness. Something that I think that's a key thing that maybe a lot of people are not doing right now, and it's a clear indication of your current level of health.
That's beautiful. So from what I got, try to hold your breath for as long as you can and see how long you can do it. The longer you do it, the more healthy your body is. It's a good indicator of your health.
Yes. The key thing about that is you don't want to push it to the limit of like almost passing out, or like when you're taking a breath, you're gasping for air. You want to keep it at a comfortable rate. Yeah, as far as like breathing practices go, I don't know if you've ever tried to like observe your breath during the day or be more consciously aware of how you're breathing. And for a lot of people, we are shallow breathing. So what I mean by shallow breathing is like our chest is rising first. So when you breathe in, just be aware, is it your chest? Do you take a deep breath in like this? That's not really a healthy way of taking a deep breath in. It should just be, your chest should remain where it is, and your belly should just rise up, as I can see here. Your chest just remain and your belly rises. So keeping one hand on your chest and one on your belly while measuring your breath during the day is it's a good way of building the mind-muscle connection of how to breathe.
Yeah, and the other quick practice that we can do throughout the day is take a couple of conscious breaths and remember to breathe to the diaphragm, to the belly first, and then to the chest. So first belly and then chest.
Yeah.
All right, so that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Shani, for being a part of the Conscious Fields. Is there anywhere that where people can follow your work? Where should they go?
Yes, thank you for having me on. It's been my pleasure. If people want to stay in touch or follow on Instagram and also YouTube right now on TikTok, it's Inspire with Shani. So inspire, the double meaning of inspire, but also breathe in, which means to inspire, on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube as well.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, so if you're listening to this message, it probably means that you went through the whole episode. And for that, I want to thank you personally for being a part of this journey. We just started Conscious Fields, and our mission really is to just spread this awareness with all, to have a much more healing, authentic, genuine, beautiful planet to live on. So if you feel the resonance, we highly invite you to share this with a friend or two that could really benefit from this message. You can also follow us on all the media. We got the Instagrams, the TikToks, and all the podcast episodes will be available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you want to send us some feedback or leave a review, you can do that on consciousfield.org/podcast. That's it. Thank you so much once again. This is Heitor signing off, and I hope to see you on the next one. Much love.